Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is Tuesday, February 11th. As we wait a few more minutes to see if anybody else shows up. I hope everybody's having a good week thus far. If you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, like I said, we're just waiting a few minutes to give people a chance to come in. Hopefully, let me just do a couple of things here. So, I was just, you know, kind of learning more and more about all the different cartoons that were coming out in the 30s. Found some more to watch today that I hadn't really been aware of before. So, hopefully now, though. And then we're just waiting on some people to show up here. Hopefully, as I said though, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. We'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. See one more time here. Let's see if we can. All right. So with that, anyways, let's see. Okay, so all right. Well, anyways, let me go ahead and talk about what's on tap for tonight. So I got a couple articles. Article and a feature that I'm going to talk about tonight. So first off, I'm going to, as many of you know, now the only reason I'm covering this is this does have to do with comics indirectly. This might be considered more mainstream news, of course. If you guys have been hearing about the stuff going on with Doge and how they're like really are trying to audit the U.S. government, trying to find all the wasteful spending and getting the pushback from a lot of the establishment in Washington. Not that we're looking here to get too political or anything like that, but since what we're going to talk about here it is comics related. I'm sure some of you, if you've been keeping up on the news with all that with Doge and all that, you probably know that one of the expenditures that was found in the USAID, the Agency for International Development, was to publish a transgender comic book in Peru, and that's the thing we're going to talk about a little bit. It was reported by Bleeding Fool that Trump has canceled that, at least according to the headline. Let's see. Also, of course, the other thing we're going to be looking over tonight, we're going to go back in time and look back to some of, at a cartoon studio, Warner Brothers' early days. We're going to look at the period in which Leon Schlesinger was producing cartoons for them. So we'll be looking at that. Plus, we'll have, of course, the wrestling wrap up, as well as the this day in each history segments. So, with all that being said, as we are coming up on at 4:43 right now, coming up on 4:45. Why don't we go ahead and get started then? Take a look at that first story. If you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, Let's look at this first article. Yeah. Donald Trump cancels U.S. government funded transgender comics in Peru. Article by Avi Green, published earlier today. La Embajada de los Estados Unidos en Perú presenta el poder de la educación. So, all right. So, Cosmic Book News reports on a LGBT propaganda comic that was being printed with USA tax dollars in Peru, which Donald Trump has now widely withdrawn funding for. So, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, obviously the federal government should not be doing this. Okay, regardless of what your particular views on this. I mean, if there are people who want to do this on their own, fine. But this should not be done by the U.S. government. They should not be going around funding comic books. Okay, but that's not what people entrusted the government entrusted their money to the government to do, is to publish comic books, regardless of what the comic book is, in other countries. This is from the article that Avi is referencing, of course. It's learned President Donald Trump's new DEI policies have impacted the comic book community. According to House Foreign Affairs Chairman Brian Mast, Republican out of Florida, under President Biden's administration, Biden DEI policy were funding a trans comic book in Peru. Quote, let's see, there was a transgender comic book, unquote, said Mast. Quote, we're trying to get our hands on the actual comic book in Peru, and I heard it's reasonably risque, unquote. According to the Daily Mail, who looked over federal documents, the trans comic book from Peru received $32,000 under former Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who served under Biden. So think about that for a moment, all right, folks? As taxpayers, right? As if you pay taxes, you pay income tax, $32,000 of your money was funneled to this project. It's one thing if you decide to make that kind of decide on your own to make that kind of investment to to do a if you decide to donate via crowdfunding or whatever. But it's another thing for the government to take your money and do it. So that's I think where the real meat of the sandwich is. But anyways, according to the Daily Mail, yeah, we read that part. American comic books infected with DEI. DEI has not only impacted the foreign comic books, but also those known as the Big Two in the United States. So DC Comics and Marvel have come under fire from fans for their woke agenda, something that has been going for over a decade. Let's see. DC has made a lot of their characters gay, including Superman. Marvel has also replaced classic characters with woke versions. The website actually got its start back in 2008 as a result of Marvel Comics going with politically correct versions of original characters. So that was from the article that Avi was just referencing. Now we're back to Avi speaking again here. Not Kal-El Clark Kent though. I'm sure they would if they thought it easy. Oh yeah, if they try to turn Clark Kent um, gay, that there'd be hell to pay. There'd definitely be hell to pay. They did that. Yeah, when they made quote unquote Superman gay, it was his son Jonathan Kent. His and Lois's son Jonathan Kent. That was the thing, and we've covered articles on that a few times on here. So in this case, it's the son of Superman introduced in the past decade, who was forcibly turned gay for the sake of woke agendas. And the worst part is that if recent management of DC Marvel is any indication, they vehemently refuse to let go of the direction and let it remain in the past. And even then, DC Marvel continuity has become so ruined it makes little difference. Much of what transpired over the past quarter century has to be jettisoned because it's just so awful. Yeah, I would say that for most fans, right? Even though some people would argue even beyond that, but I'd say for most fans, the end of the DCU, the end of Marvel was probably in 2011 when finally all the when the CCA finally became moot, right? So let's see. And again, feel free to comment and or ask questions if anything grabs your attention here. It should also be remembered that DC preceded a lot of this woke nonsense at Marvel. Um, at the time, Identity Crisis was published in 2004, introducing as they did an Asian Atom, Black Firestorm, and Latino Blue Beetle. Let's see. Yeah, Ryan Cho is the Asian Atom. Black Firestorm, that was Jason Rush, and then Latino Blue Beetle, that was Jaime Reyes. We could even add the lesbian question and Batwoman. Of course, who they're talking about there is Renee Montoya. And Batwoman, Kate Kane. The former role taken by a character who may have originally appeared in Batman the animated series, Renee Montoya, who was not originally lesbian till Gotham Central co-writers Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka decided to retcon her. In fact, if memory also serves, one of the writers who was involved in that forced and contrived step, Brubaker, later retconned a minor character, Holly Robinson, into a lesbian in the pages of Catwoman. Again, anybody who thinks it's bad enough, Marvel went miles out of their way to race gender swapping over the past decade, would do well to take a good look at DC's own efforts, which were also not based on story merit, but on political agendas. But they all came about in the worst ways possible at white characters. Well, here's the main difference, though, in Avi's argument there, and they didn't necessarily, they didn't necessarily take characters with long histories like the originals of those characters, and they were more reasonable too when you're looking at like the Atom, the Blue Beetle, and the Firestorm. More reasonable to assume that, of course, there might be there might be a certain, element there. So anyways, Donald Trump did the right thing to cancel any and all funding for this propaganda rag they speak of, and anybody who thinks LGBT ideology is such a big deal would do well to just create their own comic and fund it themselves. Now that's, I think, something, and that's a point too. This isn't, granted, obviously Avi is not somebody who is pro LGBT, but and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But going back to the point I made at the very beginning, the federal government, regardless of material or what have you, should not be using people's tax dollars to fund comic books in other countries. It doesn't matter what the material. It doesn't matter what they're trying to push. Okay. It could be a pro-conservative comic, and if they're using the money if you're using your tax dollars to fund that, that's wrong too. Okay, so let's just, get that. People don't entrust the government with their tax dollars to be funding comic books in other countries. All right, anyways, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment, so I'm going to put on some music for a moment. I'll be right back. And we'll move on to the next next. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, folks. So, anyways, so now we're going to move on to our the next feature I was going to talk about tonight. We're going to actually take a look back in time in cartoon history here. We're going to look back on Warner Brothers cartoon history. We're going to go back and look over the time in which Leon Schlesinger was producing was look at when Leon Schlesinger was was publishing comics or I'm sorry, producing cartoons rather. As soon as I can find, let's see. Yeah, there we go. During the period between 1933 and 34 here. Leon Schlesinger was, of course, somebody who was a producer of cartoons for Warner Brothers. You know, he was instrumental, along with Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, of Harman Ising fame, of bringing us like Bosco and Buddy. They were also responsible for the early days of Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies before Bugs Bunny, before Bugs Bunny, towards the end of the decade, before he sold out to Warner Brothers. Leon had a hand in helping bring Porky Pig and Daffy Duck into the world as well. So let's take a look at this part right here. So the Schlesinger Studio got off to a slow start, continuing their one-shot Merry Melodies and introducing a non-canon Bosco replacement named Buddy to serve as the new star of Looney Tunes. The studio then formed the 3-unit structure that it would retain throughout most of its history, with one of the units headed by Ben Bugs Hardaway, who had come over from Walter Lantz. Eventually Ben Hardaway would work for Walter Lantz and do a lot of work on Woody Woodpecker, and the other by Earl Duvall, who was replaced by Jack King a year later. In 1935, after Buddy proved not to be a successful character, Frayling, Fritz Frayling, helmed the Merry Melodies cartoon I Haven't Got a Hat, which introduced the character Porky Pig. Hardaway and King departed. The new arrival at Schlesinger's, Fred Tex Avery, coming over from Walter Lantz Studios, took Frayling's creation and ran with it. Avery directed a string of cartoons starring Porky Pig that established the character as the studio's first bona fide star. Of course, even to this day, Porky still bursts out of the drum saying, "That's all, folks." All right. Let's see now. Let's see. Schlesinger also gradually moved the Merry Melodies cartoons from black and white to 2-strip Technicolor in 1934, and finally the full 3-strip Technicolor in 1935. The Looney Tunes series would be produced in black and white. For much longer, until 1943. Because of the limited spacing conditions in the Schlesinger building at 1351 North Van Ness on Warner Sunset Lot, Avery and his unit, including animators Robert Clampett and Chuck Jones, were moved into a small building elsewhere on the Sunset Lot, which Avery and his team affectionately dubbed Termite Terrace. Although the Avery unit moved out of the building after a year, Termite Terrace later became a metonym for the classic Warner Brothers animation department in general. Even for years, the building after the building was abandoned, condemned, and torn down. During this period, 4 cartoons were outsourced to the iWorks studio. However, iWorks struggled to adapt his style to the type of humor that the Looney Tunes had developed by this time. And so Clampett took over as director using iWorks staff for the last 2 of these outsourced cartoons. Schlesinger was so impressed by Clampett's work on these shorts that he opened a 4th unit for Clampett to head. Although for tax reasons, this was technically a separate studio headed by Schlesinger's brother-in-law, Ray Katz. And again, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people here to engage. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, let's get back to this. So, from 1936 until 1944, animation directors and animators such as Frayling, Avery, Clampett, Jones, Arthur Davis, Robert McKinson, and Frank Tashlin worked at the studio. During this period, these creators introduced several of the most popular cartoon characters to date, including Daffy Duck in 1937's Porky's Duck Hunt by Avery, Elmer Fudd, 1940, Elmer's Candid Camera by Chuck Jones, Bugs Bunny, 1940, A Wild Hare by Tex Avery, and Tweety, 1942, A Tale of Two Kittens by Bob Clampett. Avery left the studio in 1941 following a series of disputes with Schlesinger, who shortly after closed the studio for 2 weeks due to a minor strike similar to the better-known one that occurred at Disney. A few months earlier, he banished all unionized employees in what became known in retrospect as the Looney Tune lockout. This time, Schlesinger lost nearly all of his employees of the Avery unit. Clampett and several of his key animators took over Avery's former unit, while Clampett's own position as director of the Schlesinger Cat Studio was taken by Norm McCabe, a Clampett animator whose cartoons focused in war-related humor. McCabe, in turn, lasted barely a year before being drafted, and Frank Tashlin returned to the studio to replace him. By 1942, the Schlesinger Studio had surpassed Walt Disney Productions as the most successful producer of animated shorts in the United States. Between 1942 and 1945, the Schlesinger Studio produced a number of films for the United States military in support of its efforts in World War II. Under the command of the U.S. Air Force's First Motion Picture Unit, from 1942 to 1944 by Major Theodore Seuss Geigel, better known as Dr. Seuss. The studio produced the Private Snafu and, with Walter Lantz Productions, the Mr. Hook cartoons for the servicemen's entertainment. So there we go with that. So that's all we have. That's all I had planned for tonight. Let's see. I'll go see if I can find at least another possible article to go over before we move on. And nothing new here. Yeah, well, things are a little light in the news department, in the Neats news department this week. At least thus far. Just trying to see if anything new has popped up since I checked earlier. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Not really. Well, let me check one more thing here. Yeah, so, anyways. All right, so with that being said, I guess I can talk a little bit for a few minutes. So yeah, as I started going over, as I started watching some cartoons from 1934 today, you know, um, Warner Brothers at that time under Leon Schlesinger was producing the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoon, with of course Buddy being the star character, having replacing Bosco, who was the property of Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, who took him with them when they left the studio. MGM was still producing. It was still producing some of celebrity, some of Ub Iwerk's stuff, Willie Whopper in particular, and also I think some of the earlier Comic Color cartoons. Paramount by this point had been doing by early 1934 had been doing screen songs, the old bouncing ball sing along cartoons, along with Betty Boop and Popeye the Sailor. Universal was producing Walter Lance's version of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Columbia was distributing a lot of the Charles Mint stuff, and Crazy Cat and Scrappy. United Artists was the ones who were distributing Walt Disney stuff, so Silly Symphonies and Mickey Mouse, and then Educational Film Exchanges was distributing the Terry tunes from Paul Terry, with Farm Alfalfa and Fanny Zilch and the Airedale, and then RKO Productions was still doing the Van Buren stuff, Aesop Fables among others. So that's pretty much what's going on early 1934 there. All right, so now we are coming up on 35-minute marks. I think I'm going to move on to the wrestling wrap up. As of course, we're going to go back and look over what happened on last night's Raw. Look ahead to tonight's NXT, and then and also talk a little bit of some AEW news. As some news has come through on AEW on some talent. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So first off, going back to last night's Monday Night Raw. On last night's Monday Night Raw, which took place from the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee, with Michael Cole and Pat McAfee on commentary. The opening match of the evening saw Damage Control of Dakota Kai and Io Sky defeat the Judgment Day ladies of Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. It's also believed that Liv may have been injured during the match, as they've been pushing for a possible match at WrestleMania between her and Alexa Bliss. We'll just wait and see on that. I've also talked about Io Sky possibly challenging Rhea Ripley for the WWE Women's World Title. In a non-title Elimination Chamber qualifying match, Bayley defeated Women's Intercontinental Champion Lyra Valkyrie to secure her spot. Now in the women's Elimination Chamber, you have Liv Morgan, Alexa Bliss, Bianca Belair, and Bayley now. So four of the six entrants have been secured for the March 1st pay-per-view. The War Raiders defended the WWE World Tag Team titles against American-made of Creed Brothers, retaining them via DQ. And then the main event saw Logan Paul punch his ticket for the Elimination Chamber by defeating Rey Mysterio in a qualifying match that now has John Cena, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Logan Paul. I think there was Logan Paul and Logan Paul have now all secured their spots in the Elimination Chamber. So, now let's look ahead to what you can look forward to on tonight's NXT on the CW. Let me talk a little bit about that. On tonight's NXT, coming from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, Bayley will be taking on Cora Jade in a one-on-one match. A triple threat tag team match, you have Josh Briggs teaming with Yoshiki Inamura to take on Hank and Tank, of Tank Ledger and Hank Walker, and two members of the No Quarter Catch Crew of Miles Bourne and Tavian Heights. Lexis King defends the Heritage Cup title against TNA's JDC, the former Fandango in the WWE. And in a steel cage match for the WWE NXT North American Championship, Tony D'Angelo defends against Ridge Holland. So that's what to look forward to tonight on NXT. Now in some news in regards to some other news regarding AEW, it was confirmed earlier today that Malachi Black, Ricky Starks, and Miro have all been are apparently no longer with AEW, as all three have been removed from the roster page, and Miro has been sitting there waiting for his release for a while. Some people speculate that they got their releases now because with the WWF or WWE having recently massive release, again, there's that time of the year where there's just a lot of major shakeups coming. A lot of people are looking to, trim the fat, as it were. So now it's possible after 90 days, of course, after 90 days, you might see Malachi Black and Ricky Starks in the WWE, as it was heavily rumored that they were possibly going to go there once their contracts were up. Miro, there's some talk that he might go back, but apparently Miro has signed with a Hollywood agency, possibly looking at other options to get into. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. Of course, we know a number of WWE talent that was just recently released. Isla Dawn made her final WWE appearance on Main Event this week. She was part of the releases that happened. So we're just waiting to see what all happens there. Now, granted, as even JBL pointed out, not all the WWE release talent is going to get signed by AEW. That would just be too much, and don't think they'd want to anyways, considering Tony Khan's record of using talent. I do know that it's been said that the Hurt Syndicate, MVP, Bobby Lashley, and Shelton Benjamin have been lobbying Tony Khan to now that Cedric Alexander has been released from the WWE, once the 90 days are up, 90-day non-complete clause, they've been lobbying Tony Khan to consider picking him up and getting the full Hurt Syndicate back together. Let's see now. And then, of course, we said AEW has Grand Slam this weekend, so there won't be any Collision show this Saturday, because it's essentially being replaced by the Grand Slam event over in Brisbane, Australia. So, with all that being said, of course, I think now would be a good time to move on from Wrestling Wrap Up to This Day in Niche History. So today is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. So let's go ahead, take a look back at this day in Niche History. So, first off, we're going to head back 70 years ago, as on this date 70 years ago today. The upstate territory of the NWA Upstate, which was based out of New York. Basically, it was what they call, much of the northeastern portion of the. They held an event on this date back in 1955 from the Gannon Auditorium in Erie, Pennsylvania. The main event saw Vern Gagne, who would go on later to become the first AWA World Heavyweight Champion. Vern Gagne retained the upstate version of the United States Heavyweight Championship via a double countout with Yukon Eric. Eric took the first fall. This is the best out as was the case at the time. All title matches were, of course, best 2 out of 3. Eric took the first match, Gagne took the second, and then they were both counted out in the third. And then also on that show, you saw Luigi Macera defeated Tony Verdi 2 falls to none. And then in a singles match, Władysław Talon defeated Bill McMurray in the match. So that 70 years ago today, NWA Upstate held an event in Upstate in Erie, Pennsylvania, in which the main event saw Vern Gagne retain the Upstate version of the NWA United States Of course, this was at a time when the NWA only recognized essentially 4 world titles, or they only recognized four major titles, and they were all world titles. The main NWA world title, the world heavyweight title, the world tag team title. Well, no, actually, it wasn't even that. The world heavyweight title, the world junior heavyweight title, the world women's title, and the world women's tag title. Those are the only 4, like, basically world titles. Or like every territory could claim their own world tag team title, their own United States heavyweight title. That was what was going on back then. All right, so moving on to 1965, 60 years ago today. On this date, 60 years ago today, in 1965, the 110th issue of Girls Love Stories from DC under the Arley Publishing Corporation brand. Let's see. Went on sale on this date back in 1965. It sold for 12 cents. It was 32 pages. Of course, it was more of a romance anthology with the one feature being April O'Day. But you had 3 stories in it. So on this date, 60 years ago today, 110th issue of Girls Love Stories, at a time when, of course, the comic book companies were publishing romance comics. So that happened 60 years ago today. And finally, moving ahead to the year 2000, on this date in the year 2000, Walt Disney's The Tigger movie premiered in theaters on this date back in 2000. It was, of course, an animated musical comedy film. So on this date back in the year 2000, Walt Disney's The Tigger movie, of course, starring the voices of Jim Cummings, Nikita Hopkins, Ken Sampson, John Fiedler, Peter Cullen, Andre Stroika, Kath Soucie, and Tom Attenborough. So the Walt Disney's The Tigger movie premiered on this date back in the year 2025 years ago today. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll, of course, back here tomorrow night with more news. Hopefully, I'll have some more news items for you. But again, I guess this week just kind of started off slow. There were a few interesting stories we covered thus far. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. Of course, we're back here, as I said, tomorrow night with more news. Also on this coming Sunday, Rick Piper will be joining me. He'll be looking at going back in time, looking at comics that went on sale in April 1940 from Standard Comics. So we'll be looking at that. So with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Let's see. Let me. Okay. Actually, before we leave, yeah. So, said we'll be back here with more news tomorrow. Most likely, of course. Well, of course, get you caught up on tonight's NXT results. Look ahead to tomorrow night Dynamite when we come in. Look ahead also to Grand Slam on Saturday. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope to see everybody. Let's see. And I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.